Okay, so imagine this, right? You find a weathered notebook hidden away for who knows how long, and inside is the potential to completely rewrite history.
Hmm.
We're talking about Admiral Richard E. Byrd, the famous polar explorer, and this whole controversy around his 1926 flight, over the North Pole.
It's really something, this diary,
Mhm.
because, you see, it doesn't give you those, clear-cut answers. It throws you right into the thick of it. Bird's thoughts, anxieties, all laid bare as he's navigating, one of the most extreme environments, well, anywhere.
And that's why we're here, right? We're diving deep into this diary. We've got these declassified reports, expert analyses, the whole shebang, all to hopefully try and figure out, well, what really happened. But before we get to the juicy stuff, the diary itself, let's set the scene a little bit.
So even before this flight, Byrd was already a big deal. You got to remember, this guy, he comes from this really prominent Virginia family. I mean, their history is basically American history, right?
Yeah.
And Byrd, he was on track for, this impressive career in the Navy, but then an injury happens and it kind of pushes him towards, well, aviation.
Yeah, and not just any aviation. This is like the golden age of flight, those pioneering days. And Byrd, he's right there in the middle of it all. First transatlantic flight by seaplane, 1919. This wasn't just a guy who flew planes. Byrd was pushing the limits of what was even possible.
Absolutely. And that ambition, it's key to understanding what goes down up there at the North Pole. By 1926, he'd already dipped his toes into the Arctic, so to speak, mapping Greenland, really pushing for the potential of, polar aviation. He had the skills, the experience, and let's face it, the guy knew how to get the public's attention.
He was a media darling, which, let's be real, was important back then because these expeditions, they needed funding and lots of it. But it wasn't all about fame, right? There was a real genuine desire to map these uncharted places for science.
Oh, absolutely. But this is where things get even more interesting. Yeah. Byrd, see, he wasn't the only one with his eyes on the prize. We're talking about Roald Amundsen, the first guy to conquer the South Pole. Now he's got his sights set on the North.
Talk about pressure. Amundsen throws his hat in the ring, and suddenly it's a race. And not just for personal glory, this becomes about national pride. Imagine the headlines, right? The bragging rights. This was about etching your name in the history books forever.
Exactly. And that is where this diary comes in.
Yeah.
Decades after Byrd's flight, after all the fanfare and the accolades, this diary pops up.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, those doubts, those whispers that always kind of lingered in the background, well, they're right back in the spotlight. And you know what? This wasn't like some official logbook or anything, all neat and tidy. No, this was Byrd's personal diary, filled with, scribbled notes, calculations, observations, all done on the fly in the moment.
You can practically feel the tension just leaping off the pages, right? It's like you're right there with him, crammed into that tiny cockpit, freezing cold, thousands of feet above the ice.
Exactly. And this is where those lingering doubts about Byrd's flight, they take on a whole new meaning. Because, see, now we're not just talking about, after the fact reports or what someone else thinks they remember. We've got Byrd's words right here, his state of mind during those critical hours.
It just adds this whole other layer to the story, doesn't it? Because we also know that Byrd, he actually mentions this diary later on in his own writing. So if it really did have the power to completely destroy his legacy, why not just, get rid of it, burn it? Why even bring attention to it?
It's like he almost wants us to find it. Like a challenge, right? Come on, dig deeper, see if you can figure me out.
Okay, well, challenge accepted. So let's cut to the chase. What kind of stuff are we actually finding in this diary? Give us the good stuff.
All right, well, remember how Josephine Ford, Byrd's plane, it was supposed to be chosen for, being super reliable and all that? Yeah, well, the diary tells a slightly different story.
Oh, how so?
So throughout the diary, we keep seeing these little messages, right?
Mm-hmm.
Byrd writing to Floyd Bennett, his co-pilot. Now remember, they could barely hear themselves think in that cockpit, let alone have a conversation. So they wrote stuff down. And in these messages, we see Byrd getting worried. He's definitely concerned about something. And he even confirms it straight out. They've sprung an oil leak.
Okay, yeah, an oil leak over the North Pole. Not exactly what you want to see, but was it really like a we have to turn back right now kind of situation? Planes back then, they weren't exactly known for their smooth rides.
That's exactly the point. And this is where the diary throws us for a loop. Because at one point, Byrd specifically asks Bennett, can we even make it back to base on just 2 engines? Now, why phrase it like that? If they've already reached their goal, the North Pole, why even ask?
It's like he's already thinking about turning back before they've even, supposedly accomplished what they set out to do, almost like the oil leak is I don't know, a convenient excuse maybe if they were running behind or got lost or something.
Exactly. It really makes you wonder, was the oil leak this huge flight-ending emergency? Or was it more like a convenient way to justify turning around early?
Okay, but even with the whole oil leak drama, you'd think they'd know for sure if they hit the North Pole or not, right? We're not talking about, getting lost on your way to the grocery store.
Yeah.
It's a specific spot on the map.
You'd think so, right? But even that, in the diary, it gets kind of murky. There's this one line where Byrd writes, "We should be at the pole now. Should be." Not exactly the triumphant declaration of victory we'd expect, is it?
Should be. That's a far cry from a "we made it."
Yeah.
It's almost like he's not even sure himself, like he's questioning their own navigation.
And if that wasn't enough, get this. Later on, in the diary, there's this question partially erased. How long were we gone before we turned around? Again, why phrase it like that? Turning around. If they reached the North Pole, the pinnacle of their journey, why not say that?
It just doesn't add up. I was really hoping this diary would give us some clear answers, but honestly, it's like opening a treasure chest and inside there's just another locked chest.
Well, that's the thing about these primary sources, right?
Yep.
They give us this amazing, intimate look into the past, but they rarely offer easy answers. More often than not, they just make the mystery even deeper.
So how do we even begin to untangle all this? Where do we go from here with this cryptic diary and all these clues?
Well, that's where the experts come in. But buckle up, because their interpretations, let's just say, they don't exactly agree on everything.
Oh, I do love a good historical debate. Lay it on us. What are the experts saying?
So first up, we've got Dennis Rawlins. Now, Rawlins, he's a historian, astronomer, and, well, he was never really sold on Byrd's whole master navigator image, even before this diary was a thing.
So he's coming into this with, let's say, a healthy dose of skepticism already baked in.
Exactly. And when this diary pops up with those partially erased calculations we talked about, for Rawlins, that was it. Smoking gun. Evidence that Byrd was, well, let's just say, adjusting his position, making it seem like he got closer to the pole than he actually did.
Okay, hold on. To really wrap our heads around this, we got to talk sextants for a sec. Now picture this. It's this, well, pretty ingenious tool used by navigators for centuries, right? You use it to measure angles between like the sun or stars and the horizon. Then with a bit of math wizardry, bam, you've got your latitude.
And back in 1926, up there in the Arctic, no GPS, no fancy computers, a sextant. That was your lifeline, the only way to figure out where you were in that vast icy wilderness.
Got it, yeah. So what Rollins is saying is, Byrd, he messed with his sextant readings, faked them.
That's his take on it, yeah. He thinks those erased numbers, those were Byrd's real position, way further from the pole than what Byrd officially claimed.
Wow, okay, so that's one pretty damning theory, but I'm guessing it doesn't end there, right? What about the folks in Byrd's corner? The ones who believe he actually pulled it off?
Ooh. It wouldn't be a good historical debate without two sides. So let's bring in William Mullett. Now, Mullett, he's a veteran polar navigator himself, and he's not buying it. For Mullett, those are race calculations. Simple, just errors. Mistakes happen, especially in those conditions.
The old ta-err is human defense, even if you're a seasoned explorer like Byrd.
Precisely. Mullett's point is, if you look at the diary as a whole, it doesn't actually prove that Byrd turned back early. Sure, he might have been stressed, worried about that oil leak, second-guessing his calculations, but that doesn't automatically make him a liar, right?
Okay, so we've got Rollins saying, those erasures, that's deception, plain and simple. And then we've got Mullett saying, hold your horses. Those could just be honest mistakes. Give the guy a break. Two very different interpretations of the same evidence. So where does that leave us?
Well, just to make things even more interesting, a third expert was brought in for this whole Byrd diary debate. And this is where it gets really juicy. We're talking about Dr. Jerry Newsom, an astronomer. And here's the kicker. He had no dog in this fight, meaning he came in with zero preconceived notions about Byrd or his flight.
A fresh perspective. I like it. Okay, so what did Dr. Newsom make of all this? What did he see in those scribbles and erasures?
You ready for this? His conclusion. He says that sextant data, it's basically inconclusive. Can't say for sure one way or another. He thinks, and get this, it might actually reflect Byrd's exhaustion more than anything.
Exhaustion.
Yeah, think about it. Long hours, crammed in that tiny cockpit, the noise, the cold. I mean, we're talking extreme fatigue. So Newsom's thinking even the best navigator in the world, their calculations are going to get a little wonky after all that. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, no arguing with that.
Yeah.
So what we've got here is a real head-scratcher, a diary that was supposed to give us answers. Instead, it's just created more questions. So for you, as someone who's really dug into this, what's the takeaway?
That's the beauty of history, especially when we're talking about something like this diary, a first-hand account. It's open to interpretation. We've laid it all out there, the evidence, the arguments, the different sides of the story. And now it's your turn. You get to weigh the information, look at the evidence, and come to your own conclusions. Did Byrd actually conquer the North Pole, or was it all just one big elaborate hoax? There's no easy answer, and that's okay.
It's like we've been on this amazing treasure hunt,
Right.
following all these clues, but in the end, the real treasure, it was the journey itself, the thinking, the questioning, the whole process of discovery.
Exactly. And that's what makes Byrd's story so captivating. It reminds us that history, it's not always about finding those black and white answers in a textbook. Sometimes it's about embracing the mystery, accepting that some things, they might never be completely solved. But in trying to solve them, we learn so much more. We get a deeper understanding of, well, human ambition, our fascination with the unknown, and that never-ending desire to explore both, the world around us and these stories from the past.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It reminds us that history, it's not just dates and names in a book. It's about real people, with their flaws, their dreams, their victories, and their defeats. And sometimes their stories. They don't fit neatly into those history books.
That's the beauty of a deep dive like this, right? We haven't just learned about, one controversial flight. We've gone on a journey through time, explored the science of navigation, peeked inside the mind of a true historical enigma. So what about you? What's your big takeaway? What's going to stick with you after today?
Me. Oh, I'm still stuck on those erased calculations. Were they just honest mistakes made under incredible pressure, or did Byrd deliberately mess with them to rewrite history in his favor? This diary, it doesn't give us a definitive answer, but it opens up these fascinating questions and makes you think, what would you do in that situation? With the weight of the world, the weight of history on your shoulders, that's what I'll be pondering, and I hope our listeners will too.
I love that. And goes way beyond just Byrd. It makes you question all those stories, those narratives that we just accept as historical fact. And that's what it's all about, right? Staying curious, asking questions, and never, ever stopping exploring the world around us and the stories we tell about it.
At the end of this podcast, please share your thoughts on the book, and if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.